thank you for participating in the Humane Summit, a virtual speaker series brought to you by the Humane Education Coalition. This session is sponsored by the Griffin Press, Heart, and the Humane Society of the United States. We are grateful for your attendance today for Nicole Green and Dr. Elisabeth Ormandy's speaker session, Humane Science Education, Ending the Use of Animals for Dissection. Nicole is the Director of Animalearn, the educational division of the American Anti-Vivisection Society. Elisabeth is the Executive Director of Animals and Science Policy Institute based in British Columbia. Both organizations provide education and resources on ethics and non-animal alternatives for the use of animals in schools and beyond. At this time, I will pass things over to our speakers.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you all about humane science education. My name is Nicole Green. I'm the director of Animalearn. Animalearn is a division of the American Anti-Vivisection Society. We're located in Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the US. I've been working on the issue of animals use in education for close to 20 years, and I'm very passionate about this issue. And I feel that humane education is the solution to helping to make our society a much more compassionate one.
And I'm Elisabeth. I'm co-founder and executive director of a Canadian registered charity called the Animals in Science Policy Institute, or ASPI for short. And we aim to promote better science without animals. And like Nicole, we work on the issue of animal use in education. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the ancestral and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish First Nations.
Thank you, Elisabeth. So what is humane science education? Well, animal dissection has a very long history in our educational system as an activity that is typically done to help students have hands-on learning to learn about anatomy and physiology. Sadly, this is an activity that kills millions of animals and continues to be very common in classrooms around the globe today. Many of you most likely have faced dissection at some point in your educational experience. And I had my experience in middle school. I was faced with having to dissect a frog, an earthworm, and a crayfish. I felt very sad when I was faced with having to do something like this. I felt bad for the creatures. I was an animal lover, and obviously I am an animal lover, and I didn't want to have to do something like this. So I watched as my lab partner did the activity. But what humane science education aims to do is to give those students like myself who are ethically opposed to dissection those resources to take a science class without having to cut up a dead animal in the process. Quite simply, humane science incorporates the three pillars of humane education: social justice, environmental ethics, and animal protection.
So in terms of social justice impacts, many students have strong emotional reactions to dissection. And to date, Nicole and I have met a great many students who have done dissection and were really unhappy about it. And of course, we heard from Nicole about her own lived experience and her emotions when she was asked to do animal dissections in middle school. I was never actually asked to do dissection. My high school training was in the UK. My undergrad is in neuroscience, and I still didn't dissect animals in my undergraduate degree. So when I moved over here to North America, I was really surprised that dissection is such a prevalent practice in high schools here. It very clearly puts up emotional barriers to learning for a great many students. And as we've heard from Nicole, if students ask to opt out, many teachers still ask that they simply watch their peers do the dissection. And this can lead to disengagement, which is an additional barrier to learning. And what's more, not being able to fully opt out impinges on the civil liberties of students who might want to avoid dissection for personal, religious, or ethical reasons. In my work with a First Nations educator here in Vancouver, I've learned that dissection does very little to respect or represent First Nations perspectives towards animals, and so it does little to support meaningful reconciliation efforts here in Canada and elsewhere. And despite the new curriculum here, which requires that First Nations perspectives actually be better represented in our classrooms. Some students goof around during dissection to cover up their emotional response, and this can lead to social relations that are tense between student peers. It does very little to encourage the development of empathy. So ending dissection could be considered to enhance anti-bullying campaigns by building on the natural empathy and compassion for animals and others that students already have.
And most students have a natural empathy, as Elisabeth said, a natural empathy and compassion towards animals. I know growing up, I had lived with a companion animal, cat and a dog, and many students were like me and live with these sentient beings in their homes. So you forge these relationships with animals. But when students are entering into science education classrooms that are doing dissection, that strips them of their natural ability to be compassionate and empathetic. And it's encouraging students, it's teaching them that harming animals, it's okay to harm an animal and use them and cut them apart to learn about science in the name of scientific curiosity. So at Animalearn and ASPE, what we're really trying to do is to challenge the status quo by promoting humane science education alternatives that empower students to build upon their natural empathy and compassion towards animals. So another reason why we work on this issue and why dissection just doesn't cut it is because it can sometimes negatively impact the environment. Frogs, for example, are recognized as one of the most commonly dissected animals around. And Animalearn did a study, and we found in a review of US government import records that close to 1 million frogs were captured from the wild in Mexico and then transported to the US and killed for use in science education classrooms. This is startling to understand these types of facts. And what happens when you're taking wild animals from their natural habitats, it's really being disruptive to those populations and ecosystems. Another environmental impact is the toxic chemicals that animal specimens are injected with as a preservative. So things like formalin and formaldehyde are used as a chemical preservative for these specimens. And when they're discarded, that can actually contaminate our water and our soil, and it can potentially harm humans and wildlife.
And there are, of course, many ways that dissection negatively impacts animals. Common species for dissection are frogs, as we've heard, as well as rats and fetal pigs, but there are a wide array of animal species used, and they are typically raised or caught using inhumane practices. As Nicole has mentioned, some species like frogs, as well as fish and invertebrates, are often wild caught for their use in dissection. Some species like rats and pigeons are purpose bred, and they're raised using inhumane practices and often in facilities that are unregulated. And some species like fetal pigs are wrongly considered to be byproducts of the food production industry. And then there are some species like cats and dogs that can be procured from animal shelters. So overall, dissection does very little to build an ethical culture of science that respects animal life. The picture on the bottom right of our slide here is a still from a video that went viral on social media, and it depicts a group of students in Oklahoma making their cat dissection specimens dance after receiving that instruction from their teacher. So these are some of the disrespectful things that, whether they go viral or not, are happening in our schools. So if we loop back to the three aims of humane education, social justice, environmental ethics, and animal protection, it's clear that the continued practice of dissection fails on all three counts. And at Animalearn and ASPE, we're seeking to change science teaching culture by promoting non-animal alternatives to dissection as a way of practicing and promoting humane science education.
So what are the alternatives? Elisabeth and I could talk to you for hours about the alternatives. We would love to be able to show you a lot of the alternatives. So what we have here are some alternatives that go from mobile applications to hands-on realistic models. There's something for every education level. It's amazing to see the different varieties of alternatives that are out there and that are actually still being created by companies that want to make these products available to help animals use in education. So wanted to go over a little bit of what some of our favorite alternatives. So these two alternatives, the top left is a product called the Virtuality. It is a product that's basically just a t-shirt, and with the t-shirt you can download a free app, and with the app you point it at the t-shirt and you're allowed to, and you can explore the human body systems. It's really amazing. You can go inside and you can see the beating heart, and students are just fascinated by this product. I've used it at workshops, and kids and teachers love it. It's a wonderful way to learn anatomy without having to harm an animal. And on the bottom right is a product called Frogopedia. It's an app. It was actually last year, 2018, was named the top Apple iPad app. So it is an app that allows you to look at the life cycle of the frog, to do a virtual frog dissection, as well as it has a augmented frog experience. So it's a little living frog that you can will pop up on your desktop, and it allows you to go through the different body systems of the frog. So these are two other augmented and virtual reality products that are up and coming, that have just come out. The top left is called the Leap Motion Cat Dissection, and it is a virtual cat dissection. And with the swipe of this little virtual hand here, you can wave the hand over the cat's body and learn about cat anatomy just with the swipe of that little hand there. So it's a wonderful, fun way to learn about cat dissection without having to dissect the cat. And the bottom right is a product called the Victory VR Frog Dissection, and it is the newest of all of these products that has just come out. It is a virtual frog dissection, so you're wearing a headset, and it allows you to go into an actual science class, and a virtual science teacher, nationally recognized, will walk you through the classroom and how to dissect this frog specimen. It's really fascinating and amazing to see the technology that's available, the VR and AR capabilities. What's another wonderful fact about the Victory VR frog is that they've recently partnered with Carolina Biological. So that's one of the largest companies that actually sells dead specimens. And it's nice to see that they are going to be providing this product to teachers who want to have an option for their students that don't want to dissect, or those teachers that don't want to dissect. And all alternatives don't have to be virtual reality or computer-based, but there's some really great hands-on alternatives. The top left is a product that Elisabeth can speak to a little bit better. It's from a company called Getting Nerdy with Mel and Gertie, and it's 3D paper dissections. The dissections were produced by two former science teachers. So it's really amazing. And I know, Elisabeth, you've used them, and if you want to talk a little bit more about them.
I did. So just a couple weeks ago here in Vancouver, we gave three guest classes actually in one school, and we took the 3D paper dissections along with us. It's the first time I've used them, and they were very well received by the students as well as the teachers. They might seem rudimentary on the surface because it's like cutting and sticking and coloring in, but these models are extremely detailed in how many things are labeled, the detail in terms of how the key works. There's a key that's provided by Mel and Gertie, and it not only gives you the accurate anatomical name of that body part, but it tells you what its function is in relation to other parts. So they're really, really well done.
Yeah, it's really wonderful because you're actually building the animal instead of taking the animal apart. And I think that really helps for students to retain that knowledge when they're when they're doing that dissection, that paper dissection. Another wonderful product is the Anatomy in Clay system. And it's typically a human skeletal system or an animal skeletal system, as you can see in the picture. And students can build the model using clay. So it's a great way to really have that, if you're a kinesthetic or tactile learner, to really get that hands-on learning experience. And it's been really helpful for a lot of students and teachers as a replacement to cat dissection. It's been around for a long time, and I feel that there have been a lot of studies that have been done that show that it's a great learning experience for teachers and students.
So non-animal alternatives like these perform incredibly well in terms of student learning. And our groups have found 59 different original research articles where researchers evaluated student learning after using either traditional dissection or non-animal teaching methods. And as you can see from this graph here, in 52 of the 59 studies, the students did just as well as, and in 25 cases, better when they used non-animal teaching methods compared to when they used dissection. The students in these 59 studies were from all levels of education, from secondary school to university, pharmacology and biology classes, to vet school and med school. So this data provides compelling evidence that educational goals at all levels can be met without using real animals for dissection.
So not only can you learn using, it's been substantiated that you can learn just as well from dissection alternatives. It's been proven that with alternatives, they are a lot more, there's a cost savings using non-animal alternatives. So as you can see in this chart, it outlines that alternative methods cost less, much less, significantly less than animal dissection. So with animal dissection, it's typical that schools need to purchase specimens year after year, because after they're used one time, they're typically thrown away. So what's the benefit of using alternative and investing in alternative is that they can be used over and over again without much of an investment in keeping them alive and well, so to speak. So this is a point that we definitely like to make with teachers, especially schools. Some schools in the US, and I'm sure in Canada, have budgetary restrictions. So a lot of times this is one of the points that we bring up, that if you're doing dissection and you want to save money, you may want to invest in alternatives, because over a time period, over a certain 3-year time period, in this case, you can certainly save a significant amount of money.
So at the teacher level then, non-animal alternatives are often more effective, or at the very least just as good for education compared with dissection. They're cheaper, they're quicker, and easier to set up and take down. They are no mess, no fuss, because there are no harsh chemicals to dispose of after your class is done.
And at the student level, some students learn at different paces than others. So using non-animal alternatives are great for students because they can use the products over and over again, and really it helps them to retain that knowledge that they're learning. Dissection, as I said before, is usually a one-time deal. And so alternatives, again, really help students to be able to learn the materials as opposed to being squeamish or turned off by dissecting an animal.
And non-animal alternatives provide a safer learning experience. So there are no sharp scalpels that you need to put in the hand of students who are perhaps having a traumatic experience at home, or you're not exposing teachers and students to the harsh preservative chemicals either. So as a result, non-animal alternatives can offer more inclusive educational experiences for students because everyone can participate. So what policies are there pertaining to dissection? Well, at the federal policy level, there is typically no formal national oversight of dissection in many countries. So for example, here in Canada, the Canadian Council on Animal Care sets and maintains standards for the care and use of animals in science, including animals in science education. But they don't oversee elementary or secondary schools.
Fortunately, there are science education organizations that discourage dissection as an educational strategy in science classes. For example, the National Science Teachers Association recommends that science teachers be prepared to present an alternative for those students that want to, where an activity may make them feel uncomfortable. And they also list the different states that offer student choice policies.
So in Canada, education is managed provincially. At the level of school districts in my home province of British Columbia, there are only 4 of the 60 school districts in BC that have student choice policies in place regarding dissection. So dissection is pretty much at individual teacher discretion here. There are no laws in place regarding dissection practices provincially. And so there are very few policy mechanisms that we can use to affect top-down change. So for example, teachers here have a collective bargaining agreement, which states that teachers cannot be told how to do their jobs. So the Minister of Education has no mechanism to enact a province-wide ban on dissection, for example, because that would be seen as being too prescriptive over teaching methods. So getting more student choice policies at the school board level is the only feasible option that we currently have here to affect meaningful policy change.
And here in the US, there are currently 18 states as well as Washington, D.C. That have enacted either laws or policies that give students the right to opt out of dissection, and that's just at the K-12 level. But groups like Animalearn and ASPE and other US groups are working with state legislators to help encourage more states to pass similar legislation to give students that legal right to stand up and say that they want to opt out and to afford them an alternative. Fortunately, today I can report to you that there are a few states that do have dissection choice bills in motion. So that's really good news for us to be able to report, and hopefully later this year we'll have even better news to report. So dissection could be phased out tomorrow with no detriment to student learning at all. In fact, if dissection ended, the benefits would definitely include a safer, more inclusive educational experience for students, lower costs for schools, an end to the procurement and killing of animals, millions of animals, and the use of innovative non-animal teaching methods would help build a culture of respect for animals, because real animals would no longer be used in the name of science education.
So at least on the surface, it seems like ending dissection is a really winnable issue for humane education. But of course, what we're asking for is a change in the very culture of science teaching, and there is resistance to that change. So how are Nicole and I and other groups campaigning for solutions? So in August 2017, ASPE hosted a day-long workshop on replacing animals in secondary education, and the participants are pictured here in our slide. Everyone that was present that day agreed to form an Eclipse Dissection Working Group, which is an international working group that shares resources, advocacy strategies, and we really support each other. So for example, if there's a letter that one group is writing to an organization, we all co-sign the letter, so we're stronger together. We are now 16 members strong and growing, and the groups that are currently represented are PETA, RSPCA UK, RSPCA New Zealand, SAFE New Zealand, Intraniche, the National Anti-Vivisection Society, and the New England Anti-Vivisection Society, as well as, of course, Animalearn and ASPE. We do, as an individual organization, ASPE does a lot of teacher engagement. We have a guest class program where myself or my project coordinator will go into schools and do a class using non-animal alternatives. We do lots of info sessions and workshops for teachers. We attend teacher conferences, and this year we'll be doing an educational webinar series targeted towards teachers. And we're specifically working with pre-service teachers, so those individuals who are in their science teacher training programs. And we want to make the switch to non-animal alternatives as easy as possible for teachers, so we offer free class plans and other resources. And to increase the accessibility of our resources, this year we'll be translating our offerings into French, Mandarin, and Punjabi. And we also have an online searchable alternatives database that we've curated after receiving a lot of feedback from teachers about what works, what doesn't, and what they need. Last year was the first year giving out our teaching and student awards to recognize individuals who are advancing humane science education in their school communities. And those awards come with a cash prize that are to be spent, that is to be spent on non-animal alternatives. And we also do the policy work that we can to get student choice policies at provincial and school district levels. And last year, thanks to our work with a wonderful group of students, we gained a significant policy win in the district of North Vancouver, who will be implementing a new student choice policy in the coming months. And in addition to our formal projects with teachers and students, we take every opportunity to raise public awareness. So we have social media channels and we do outreach at public events as well.
Wonderful. And Animalearn is doing very similar efforts here in the US. But one of the things that we are unique with our organization is we have a program called the Science Bank, where we loan out dissection alternatives to teachers and students who are opposed to dissection, who want to use dissection alternatives, want to try them out for a period of time and then return them back to us. That's specifically for individuals in the United States. It's actually the largest humane science loan lending program in the US. We have over 650 different types of alternatives available through the Science Bank. And it's completely free. You can borrow from us and then we pay to ship to you, and it's just shipping things back to us. So that's a wonderful program that we've had in place for over 20 years now. It's been growing and growing. Teacher engagement, one of the things that I pride myself is going to science teacher conferences and really educating those teachers about the issue of dissection and the alternatives that are available, exposing science teachers to the alternatives, because they may be a little bit apprehensive and may only want to, that's how they're going to learn about alternatives. So we do workshops, we exhibit and have giveaways. We partner with a lot of the companies that are providing the alternatives, and so that we can make those products available and giveaways at our workshops and also at our booth when we go to science teacher conferences. Similarly, we have a Humane Educator and Humane Student of the Year award to recognize those individuals that are standouts and making a difference for animals use in education. And also our policy work. We, every year we've been going to the National Conference for State Legislators and trying to engage with legislators in those states that don't have student choice policies. And I feel like that's really benefited us. Because we do have some bills that are in motion right now. Hopefully there'll be some good news to report, as I said before. But it makes me feel really good to be able to talk to different constituents. We have science teachers, we have legislators, we have teachers and students. It's nice to be able to talk to a variety of different people about this issue and really kind of get them on board about it. Other things that we try to do is promote through social media and our marketing materials. One of the things we like to do is have fun marketing tools like this little squishy cat who has our logo on it. So that's something that teachers can take away at our conference, or a tote bag with a message on it. and they're spreading the word that way. So yeah, that I would say that's the things that we're working on. And if you're interested, you can go to the animalearn.org website, look at some of our resources. You can link to the Science Bank from there if you're interested in learning more about the Science Bank offerings, and follow us on social media. We actually just recently started our Instagram account, and I'm really excited about it. So please follow us on social media. And if you're interested in learning more about Animalearn and the things that we do, you can contact me at ngreen@animalearn.org.
And similarly to Animalearn, we have a really active website. We do also work on replacing animals in research and testing as well as in education. So there's lots of great information about that extra stuff on our website. You can, like Animalearn, you can follow us on Instagram, you can join us on Facebook, on Twitter, and if you want to reach me personally, you can contact me at Elisabeth@animalsinscience.org.
And thank you everyone so much. We hope that we've encouraged you to do more on behalf of humane science education.
Thank you.
This concludes our speaker session. Thank you so much for joining us. You can learn more here or by clicking the resource links in the summit. We hope you've enjoyed this speaker session and that you'll join us for another one soon. Please consider making a donation to the Humane Education Coalition to help us continue providing programs and events like the Humane Summit. We rely on your support to help create a more compassionate, just, and sustainable future through education. Visit hecoalition.org/give to contribute today. Thanks again.